Omar Carrasquillo was just another street hustler from North Philadelphia before he finessed the entire cable industry out of $35 million and became one of the most notorious digital pirates in American history. This is the story of a man who went from getting robbed for his last $30,000 to building a streaming empire that rivaled Netflix, only to lose it all because he couldn't resist showing off on YouTube. Let's take a look at the rise and fall of OmiInAHellCat. OmiInAHellCat is a YouTuber and entrepreneur from Philadelphia, best known for creating one of the largest illegal streaming empires in the world.
Now, if you would have asked me back in 2006 what was my favorite car was a Camaro. Probably because I could afford it at the time, but I couldn't afford it anyway. But probably because of the Transformers movie, but this is probably my favorite looking.
Before losing it all to federal prosecution. But his story starts way before the millions, the mansions, and the federal raids. Born Omar Carrasquillo on August 6, 1986 in North Philadelphia, Omi grew up in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city. North Philly ain't no joke. It's a place where poverty, violence, and the drug game are woven into the fabric of daily life. His father was a high-ranking drug dealer who, according to Omi himself, ran Philly for a long time and controlled entire blocks throughout the city. This wasn't some small-time corner boy. His pops was moving serious weight and had serious power in the streets.
All right, that was Bill Omar Carrasquillo, who's also known as OmiInAHellCat, a popular YouTuber who had almost 1 million subscribers, showing off his fancy jewelry and his luxury car collections in a spacious home.
But here's where it gets crazy. His father had over 38 kids just on his side of the family. When you add in Omi's mother's 6 children, that means Omi had 44 siblings total. That's literally a small army of brothers and sisters. But it also meant resources were spread thin and individual attention was hard to come by. In a household that big, you either learned to stand out or you got lost in the shuffle. Growing up in North Philly during the crack epidemic of the late 80s and 90s, Omi was exposed to the drug game from day one. The streets were all he knew. Violence, poverty, and hustling were just part of daily life.
What happened yesterday?
Yeah,
the FBI came in.
For the first time, the first time you guys came here, everybody said that it was bullcrap.
Right. So just tell me what happened.
Nothing, they just came in.
His neighborhood was the type of place where gunshots were background noise, and seeing someone get arrested was as common as seeing the mailman. His father didn't just talk about the game, he actively brought Omi into it. According to Omi, his dad taught him how to cook crack cocaine in a Pyrex when he was only 12 years old. Think about that for a second. While most kids his age were playing video games or riding bikes, Omi was learning the chemistry of drug manufacturing. With his dad being such a major player in the game, Omi naturally gravitated toward that lifestyle, seeing it as the only way to make real money and gain respect in his neighborhood.
The things that they alleged that I did, the copyright infringement, which I don't think I ever did anything wrong. Obviously, I was running businesses wide open in the public.
The family dynamics were complicated too. With so many siblings and his father's lifestyle, there wasn't much stability or traditional family structure. Omi learned early that if you wanted something, you had to go get it yourself. Nobody was going to hand you nothing, and if you showed weakness, somebody would take advantage of it. As Omi got older, he naturally followed the path that had been laid out for him. He started dealing drugs in high school, and after getting arrested during his junior year, he made the decision to drop out in the 11th grade. School wasn't teaching him what he thought he needed to know anyway.
Not completely innocent would be a false statement. Now, ignorance is no excuse for the law. I try to go back and forth with a few accountants.
The streets were his classroom and the curriculum was survival. For years, Omi continued with his criminal activities, moving product and trying to build his own reputation in the game. But unlike his father, who seemed to have a natural talent for avoiding serious consequences, Omi struggled to find his footing. He wasn't built for the violence and paranoia that came with street life, but it was all he knew. When Omi had his son, Omir, who was diagnosed with autism, everything started to shift for him. This became one of the most pivotal points in his life where he started realizing he needed more than what the streets could offer.
Should I have done a little faster? Of course, 100%. But do I think that I blatantly just ran away from the law and tried to evade and try to money? None of that stuff I've ever done.
Looking at his son, Omi saw innocence and potential that he wanted to protect. He couldn't keep living the same destructive cycle that had trapped his father and so many others in his family. Having an autistic child also meant that Omi needed legitimate income and stability. Special needs children require resources, therapy, and consistent care that you can't provide when you're constantly looking over your shoulder or worried about getting locked up. This responsibility started weighing on him heavily and made him question whether the street life was really worth it. But the real wake-up call came on July 4, 2014, when Omi got finessed out of his last $30,000 in what would be his final drug deal. He had been preparing for this transaction for 3 days straight.
Hundreds of thousands of followers now.
You know, hold tight, and you know, and any entrepreneur that's doing anything right now, this can be you. If you think you're doing the right thing, and obviously you're on a great, you know, just always check.
Bagging up work for some buyers down in Delaware who claimed they wanted to purchase a significant amount of product. Omi had already paid his crew and gotten the drugs fronted to him by one of his connects, so everything he had was riding on this one deal. When it came time to make the exchange, Omi's partner jumped out of the car with all the product and got into the buyer's vehicle. They handed him a taped-up box in return, which should have been filled with cash. But when they opened it back at the car, it was nothing but newspaper. Omi had been completely played. What happened next was like something out of a movie. Omi got into a high-speed chase trying to catch the scammers, but they got away with everything. He lost not just his own money, but also the product that had been fronted to him, which meant he now owed his connect with nothing to show for it. This wasn't just a financial loss, it was potentially life-threatening. That robbery was the final straw. Omi went home and told his girlfriend at the time that he was done selling drugs forever. He realized that he wasn't cut out for the streets and that this lifestyle would eventually get him killed or locked up for life. More importantly, he recognized that he had responsibilities now that were bigger than his own survival. "I ain't never going to sell drugs again," he told his girl that night. "This ain't my lane. This ain't my calling."
But at the end of the day, it's like, that wasn't my lane. That wasn't my calling. So what the f am I indulging in this business for? I went back home and I told my girl at the time, I'm like...
More importantly, he recognized that he had responsibilities now that were bigger than his own survival. "I ain't never going to sell drugs again," he told his girl that night. "This ain't my lane. This ain't my calling." It was a moment of clarity that would eventually lead him to discover the loophole that would make him tens of millions of dollars. But going legitimate when you've never had a real job and you're already in your late 20s ain't easy. Omi had to figure out how to make money without the skills or connections that most people build through traditional education and employment. He had to use what he knew, which was essentially how to move product and satisfy customers and apply it to something legal.
Yeah, it was more of a negotiation between, you know, like my lawyers went in, but, you know, God willing, everything turns out good, positive, and, you know.
Even though Omi was stepping away from drugs, he still had that hustler mentality that had been ingrained in him since childhood. He understood supply and demand, customer service, and how to scale a business. These weren't skills he learned in school. They were survival mechanisms he developed on the streets. He started small, burning copies of popular video games onto blank discs and selling them around the neighborhood for quick profit. This was still technically illegal, but it was a far cry from dealing drugs. When that wasn't profitable enough, he moved to burning DVDs of movies since they were cheaper to make and had higher profit margins. He could buy blank DVDs in bulk, download movies from the internet, and sell them for $5 to $10 each.
Believe it or not, I just released a video that I started like in 2015. And I did one video and I went back to post-production.
But as streaming services like Netflix and Hulu started taking over and DVDs became obsolete, Omi knew he had to adapt or get left behind. The same technological changes that were killing his DVD business were also creating new opportunities. He just had to be smart enough to see them and bold enough to capitalize on them. In late 2014, Omi noticed that his DVD business was dying because of streaming services. But instead of giving up, he saw an opportunity that would change his life forever. He realized that while people loved the convenience of streaming, they hated paying multiple monthly subscriptions to different services.
They give you a hard inquiry, which lowers your, like, it's stupid. And it's a fact.
Netflix had some content, Hulu had others, HBO had premium shows, and cable companies were charging hundreds of dollars for packages that included channels people didn't even want. Omi's breakthrough moment came when he discovered Amazon Fire Sticks and an app called Kodi. Fire Sticks were legitimate streaming devices that Amazon sold for around $30 to $40, designed to let people access their legal streaming subscriptions on their TVs. But Omi realized he could jailbreak these devices and preload them with an app called Kodi that would give users access to virtually unlimited content. Kodi was an open source media platform that was technically legal, but
but that's a lot. That's when I got a little older. That right there is like 20. I started to get shit together after 2012.
But it became popular with people distributing pirated content because anyone could develop apps for it. Omi started buying Fire Sticks in bulk from Amazon, jailbreaking them with custom software, and loading them up with Kodi apps that provided access to movies, TV shows, and live television. The beauty of his business model was that he could offer customers everything they wanted for one low price. Instead of paying $200 plus a month for cable plus multiple streaming subscriptions, customers could buy one of Omi's preloaded Fire Sticks for $140 to $150 and have access to everything. It was a one-time payment that gave them more content than they could ever watch.
Hey, the price is never gonna change. Hey guys, it's gonna be $15. It was $15 when it was this amount of stuff.
Omi was one of the first entrepreneurs to really capitalize on this opportunity, and his timing was perfect. This was right when cord cutting was becoming popular and people were getting fed up with expensive cable bills. His business model worked perfectly. He was making a few $1,000s a week in profit, which was more money than he'd ever made legitimately. After making about $1 million in his first year selling Fire Sticks, Omi realized he needed to think bigger. Loading content onto individual sticks was time-consuming and limited his growth potential. He was essentially running a one-man operation, and there were only so many hours in a day.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, you get to chill around them all day. You better live with her too, because you ain't paying no motherfucking rent with that little bit of ass money.
That's when Omi made the decision that would make him truly wealthy. He hired a developer and decided to create his own streaming app. Instead of preloading content onto physical devices, he would create a service that customers could access from any device with an internet connection. This would allow him to serve unlimited customers without the physical limitations of manufacturing and shipping Fire Sticks. Omi's app was called Gears TV, inspired by his favorite video game series Gears of War. But this wasn't just some amateur operation. Omi invested serious money into making Gears TV a professional quality service that could compete with legitimate streaming platforms. Gears TV was an all-in-one entertainment package that had everything customers could want.
They never got in trouble with the FBI. They're right now, they're getting sued by DirecTV.
It included thousands of movies and TV shows, access to major networks like ABC, NBC, CBS, BET, and AMC, plus international channels from Canada and the UK. But here's where it got really crazy. Gears TV also provided access to premium content like NFL Sunday Ticket and pay-per-view events that normally cost hundreds of dollars. The pricing was what made Gears TV irresistible to customers. While cable companies were charging $150 to $300 a month for similar content, Omi was offering everything for just $15 a month. It was literally too good to be true, which is exactly why it was so successful. Word about Gears TV spread like wildfire through social media and word of mouth.
But I think it's going to be hot too when you buy a real pair. You can actually, scan a QR code and bring them in with you also.
Within the first year, the service had over 100,000 monthly subscribers, which meant Omi was pulling in about $1.5 million a month in revenue. That's $18 million a year from an app that he'd created with just a small team. But the growth didn't stop there. As more people discovered Gears TV and realized how much money they could save, the subscriber base continued to explode. Omi was adding thousands of new customers every month, and each one was paying him directly for access to content that he was essentially stealing from major media companies.
Back to flourishing again with other business ventures, which means that, I've always done something right, I just feel like, I found a loophole, I ran through it, and I did great. There's other colleagues of mine that are in the same business that I was in.
The crazy part is that Omi's service was actually better than what most legitimate companies were offering. His app had a cleaner interface, more reliable streaming, and better customer service than many official platforms. Customers weren't just choosing Gears TV because it was cheap. They were choosing it because it was genuinely superior to the alternatives. After running Gears TV successfully for about 2 years, Omi received an offer that would set him up for life. A group of investors approached him wanting to buy the app for $40 million. But here's the genius part. The deal was structured so that Omi would still receive royalties from all future revenue generated by the app. This meant that Omi got $40 million up front, but he would continue getting paid as long as the app remained profitable. It was like winning the lottery and getting a guaranteed income stream at the same time. For a guy who had been robbed of his last $30,000 just a few years earlier, this was an unimaginable amount of wealth. So in a matter of 4 years, Omi went from getting robbed for his last $30,000 to making $40 million from selling his app, plus ongoing royalties that were bringing in millions more. But Omi wasn't satisfied with just one success. He was addicted to the game and wanted to prove that Gears TV wasn't just a fluke.
Then I had to really dive deep in who I was as a person. You know what I'm saying? My core beliefs. I'm not that nigga who thinks that he could just run around and just act tough, because that's not who I am as a person. I'm not soft.
Using his experience and the money from the Gears TV sale, he immediately started working on his next project. Reloaded TV was going to be even better than Gears TV, with an upgraded user interface, more reliable servers, and additional features that would make it the ultimate streaming platform. Reloaded TV quickly became one of the most popular apps in the IPTV world, attracting hundreds of thousands of subscribers who were willing to pay premium prices for premium content. Between the royalties from Gears TV and the revenue from Reloaded TV, Omi was making more money than he knew what to do with. With all this money flowing in, Omi started living like a king. His car collection was absolutely insane. Over 50 luxury and exotic vehicles, including multiple Lamborghinis, Porsches, McLarens, and custom builds that cost more than most people's houses. We're talking about cars that cost $200,000, $300,000, even $500,000 each. His garage looked like a luxury car dealership. His jewelry collection was worth millions of dollars. Custom chains, watches, and rings that were designed specifically for him by high-end jewelers.
$1 million.
Yeah. Oh, you know what's crazy? It was 920 grand, but it was so much more than that. It was like jewelry, like, you know what I'm saying? Rings, a couple things that were sentimental, but it is what it is, bro. Like, you see, when me and you talked, I charged that game from the rip.
We're not talking about some basic gold chains. These were pieces that cost $100,000, $200,000, sometimes even more. His watch collection alone was worth more than most people will make in their entire lifetime. The real estate portfolio was equally impressive. Omi owned dozens of properties across Philadelphia, including multiple mansions that were worth millions each. These weren't just houses. They were compounds with multiple buildings, swimming pools, home theaters, and every luxury amenity you could imagine. But it wasn't just about accumulating wealth. Omi was also generous with his money in ways that got people's attention. He would casually give $1,000 tips to pizza delivery drivers and post the videos on social media. He would show off million-dollar checks and talk about making that much money in a single week. This wasn't just flexing. This was a man who had gone from absolute poverty to unimaginable wealth, and he wanted the world to know about it. But just as Omi was reaching the peak of his success, he made a decision that would eventually destroy everything he had built.
Because everybody knew that I was a loner. I was by myself. So I think everything started to change once I started going out. Because I've never been out. I've always said the story, like, I didn't go out, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't do nothing. Yeah. I wanted to make sure my paper was right.
In May 2019, despite having everything he could ever want, Omi decided he needed more. He wanted fame and recognition to go along with his wealth. That's when he made the fatal decision to start a YouTube channel called OmiInAHellCat, where he would document his lavish lifestyle and give motivational speeches to his followers. On the surface, this seemed like a smart business move. He had an incredible success story and a lifestyle that people would want to watch. But what Omi didn't realize is that this decision would put him directly in the crosshairs of federal law enforcement. Omi's first vlog was uploaded on May 16, 2019, and was titled "Payday at Reloaded Construction." The video showed him leaving his mansion, walking past his fleet of luxury cars, and talking about being an entrepreneur. He visited his nightclubs, showed off his construction company, and gave viewers a glimpse into his incredibly wealthy lifestyle. The video was professionally shot and edited, and it painted Omi as a successful businessman who had made it through hard work and smart investments. But there was one problem. People started asking questions about how exactly he had made all this money. A construction company and some nightclubs don't typically generate the kind of wealth that Omi was displaying.
But right now, it's more right. Like right now, I'm heading into like signing with an MCM, because you know like Google's not good at placing ads and they don't pay enough. So right now, you know, being in the car industry, our you know what CPM is, right? Well, CPM is what you get paid per 1,000 views. Car community is like #1. We get the highest CPM in YouTube.
The video got 60,000 views in just 3 days, which was incredible for someone with only 14,000 Instagram followers at the time. Within 3 months, he had over 100,000 YouTube subscribers, and a few months after that, he hit 300,000. The growth was exponential, and Omi was loving every minute of the attention. Here's where Omi made his biggest mistake. He couldn't resist talking about his business. When people asked how he made his money, instead of keeping it vague or sticking to his cover story about construction and nightclubs, Omi started openly discussing his IPTV operations. In interviews and videos, he would talk about how he saw a hole in the system and exploited it, and how he made millions from app development. He would say things like, streaming isn't illegal, there's no laws against it, and the copyright acts haven't been updated since the 1960s. He was essentially giving anyone who was listening a detailed explanation of his entire business model. The problem was that Omi genuinely believed what he was doing was legal. He had consulted with lawyers who told him that his business model existed in a legal gray area, and he convinced himself that he was just an innovative entrepreneur who had found a loophole that bigger companies hadn't discovered yet.
It's an acceptance of responsibility for me. It just sucks. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks to lose my house, to lose properties, money, all my cars, my jewelry.
But what Omi didn't understand is that federal prosecutors don't care about gray areas or loopholes. If you're making millions of dollars by distributing copyrighted content without permission, they're going to find a way to charge you with something. And by talking about his business so openly, Omi was giving them all the evidence they needed. As Omi's YouTube channel grew, so did the scrutiny of his lifestyle. People started doing the math and realizing that his claimed legitimate businesses couldn't possibly generate the kind of wealth he was displaying. A construction company in Philadelphia might make good money, but it doesn't buy you 50 luxury cars and multiple mansions. Media outlets started picking up on Omi's story, and not all the attention was positive. Some articles questioned the source of his wealth and speculated about whether his businesses were actually legitimate. But instead of backing down or becoming more discreet, Omi doubled down on his public persona. He started doing more interviews, appearing on podcasts, and even making appearances on local news stations. Every time someone questioned his wealth, Omi would defend himself by explaining his business model in even greater detail. He was literally teaching people how to commit the same crimes he was committing, all while broadcasting it to hundreds of thousands of viewers.
A lot of people thought that I was exaggerating, that this amount of money wasn't taken. It's like, no, bro, this is not. Now the case went up. It went up a notch. I'm still trying to find out who took it.
Only 6 months after Omi uploaded his first YouTube video, the FBI came knocking. On November 21, 2019, federal agents raided his home and multiple properties, seizing everything they could get their hands on. They took around $6 million in cash, dozens of cars, and over 20 properties. The official headline said he was being investigated for tax evasion and money laundering, but anyone paying attention knew this was really about his streaming empire. The raid was massive and coordinated, involving multiple agencies and dozens of agents. They didn't just take his assets, they took every piece of electronic equipment they could find, including computers, phones, hard drives, and even gaming consoles. They were building a case, and they wanted every piece of digital evidence that might connect Omi to his illegal streaming operations. Instead of staying quiet like any smart criminal would do, Omi made perhaps his biggest mistake yet. He went live on YouTube immediately after the raid to tell everyone he was innocent. But in trying to defend himself, he basically confirmed everything the feds suspected.
I was an app developer for Cody. Yeah, it was pretty much IPTV and taxes. One thing, they're trying to hit me with tax evasion, and I never really evaded taxes. Bro, when I tell you they took everything, they took every SD card, every camera, every television in my houses.
IPTV is a great area, he said during the live stream. The copyright acts haven't been updated since the 1960s, and I hit a great area and exploited it. He was literally confessing to federal crimes on a live broadcast that thousands of people were watching. Any competent lawyer would have told him to shut up and not say another word, but Omi couldn't help himself. He continued by saying, "I saw a hole in a system and I exploited it, and I made a ton of money doing it." This wasn't a denial. This was a detailed confession that prosecutors would later use against him in court. Omi was so convinced that what he had done was legal that he couldn't understand why talking about it was making his situation worse. During his various interviews and social media posts, Omi explained exactly how his streaming empire worked, giving federal prosecutors a roadmap to his entire operation. What he was doing was purchasing legitimate subscriptions to cable and satellite providers like Comcast, Dish Network, and DirecTV. These companies would send him set-top boxes that were designed to decrypt and display their content.
And the appeal takes what, 3-4 years?
Oh man, I couldn't even tell you. I know he has to get sentenced before the appeal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's January
27th.
Yep, 27th.
You know, and that's even if the judge is like kind of lenient on him.
But here's where it became illegal. Omi would purchase additional equipment called decoders that would allow him to capture the decrypted content from these boxes. He would then upload this content to his own servers and redistribute it to his subscribers over the internet. This was textbook copyright infringement, wire fraud, and potentially racketeering. The scale of the operation was massive. Omi had servers running 24/7, customer service representatives handling subscriber issues, and a sophisticated billing system that processed millions of dollars in payments. This wasn't some small-time operation. This was a full-scale business that was competing directly with major media companies. According to the government's later indictment, Omi's various streaming services generated approximately $34 million in subscription fees over several years. But the real number was probably much higher when you factor in the $40 million sale of Gears TV and other revenue streams. The feds weren't playing games. They had been building a case against Omi for months, possibly even years before the first raid. They had financial records showing millions of dollars in unexplained income, server logs proving the distribution of copyrighted content, and subscriber databases with hundreds of thousands of customers. They also had Omi's own words from his YouTube videos and interviews, where he had essentially confessed to everything they suspected him of doing.
Made an app called Gears TV. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it or if you ever watched it, anything with a Gears TV app on it, it was mine. The app sold about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. So I'm living my regular life, you know what I'm saying?
In the world of federal prosecution, having the defendant explain their crimes in detail on video is about as good as it gets for building a case. The investigation expanded beyond just Omi to include his associates, employees, and anyone else who might have been involved in the operation. The feds were treating this like a major organized crime investigation, using techniques typically reserved for drug cartels and mafia organizations. On top of the copyright infringement charges, Omi also had serious tax problems. When you're making millions of dollars from illegal activities, it's pretty hard to explain that income to the IRS. Omi claimed that he had hired a certified public accountant to handle his taxes, but it turned out this person wasn't actually licensed and hadn't been filing his returns properly. The tax debt alone was in the millions, and the penalties and interest were accumulating daily. Even if Omi could somehow beat the copyright charges, the tax evasion case was pretty straightforward. He had made millions of dollars and hadn't paid taxes on it. In a bizarre twist, Omi claimed that he had been planning to pay his tax debt, but that $920,000 in cash that he was going to use for a down payment had been stolen from his house. He even made a YouTube video about it titled, "I Got Robbed for $1 million," though he later deleted it. Most people were skeptical of this story, seeing it as a convenient excuse for why he hadn't paid his taxes. For almost 2 years after the initial raid, Omi continued living his life relatively normally, while the federal investigation continued. He kept making YouTube videos, buying expensive items, and traveling, though he was clearly under constant surveillance. Then, on September 21st, 2021, the feds came back for him. This time, they weren't just seizing property, they were arresting him. The indictment was unsealed, and Omi was officially charged with a laundry list of federal crimes including money laundering, copyright infringement, wire fraud, and tax evasion. The arrest was captured on video and later posted online, showing federal agents taking Omi into custody at his home while his family watched. It was a dramatic fall from grace for someone who had been living like a king just a few years earlier. Even after his arrest, Omi couldn't stop talking to the media. He did interviews where he continued to defend his actions and explain his business model, apparently not understanding that every word he said was potentially being used against him by prosecutors. In one interview, he said, "I found a loophole and ran through it, and I never did anything wrong."
To flourishing again with other business ventures, which means that, I've always done something right, I just feel like, I found a loophole, I ran through it, and I did great. There's other colleagues of mine that are in the same business that I was in.
He continued to maintain that his streaming services were legal and that he was being unfairly targeted by the government. Every interview was just more evidence for the prosecution to use against him in court. His lawyers must have been pulling their hair out watching their client continue to incriminate himself on national television, but Omi seemed to genuinely believe that if he could just explain his side of the story, people would understand that he wasn't really a criminal. When the final indictment was unsealed, Omi was facing 62 different federal charges that could have resulted in decades in prison. The charges included conspiracy to commit copyright infringement, wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Each charge carried significant prison time, and if convicted on all counts, Omi could have been looking at life in prison. The government's case was overwhelming. They had financial records, server logs, subscriber databases, and most damaging of all, Omi's own admissions from his YouTube videos and interviews. Federal prosecutors have a conviction rate of over 95%, and this case was about as straightforward as they come. After months of legal battles and mounting legal fees that were costing him hundreds of thousands of dollars, Omi finally realized he couldn't beat the federal government. His lawyers explained that going to trial would be extremely risky and that the evidence against him was so strong that a conviction was almost certain. In 2023, Omi made the difficult decision to plead guilty to the charges against him. In a YouTube video announcing his decision, he finally showed some real accountability, saying,
I think I could turn it up to millions instantly. Instantly. It ain't even a fact. I mean, it's a fact. It ain't even no question about it. So if everybody puts up 25 bands, we could walk into anywhere in Silicon Valley.
What I did was kind of messed up, and acknowledging that he had created an app that basically had live TV illegally. This was a major change from his previous stance where he had maintained his innocence and claimed that his business was legal. The reality of potentially spending the rest of his life in prison had finally broken through his delusions about the legality of his operation. When it came time for sentencing, federal prosecutors recommended that Omi receive over 15 years in federal prison. They argued that his crimes had cost media companies millions of dollars and that he had shown no remorse for his actions. They also pointed to his continued public statements defending his crimes as evidence that he was likely to reoffend if given a lenient sentence. However, the judge felt that 15+ years was excessive for what was essentially copyright infringement, even on a massive scale. On June 16, 2023, Omi was sentenced to 66 months, 5.5 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. In addition to the prison time, Omi was ordered to pay $16 million in restitution to the media companies whose content he had pirated. He also had to forfeit over $30 million in assets, including all of his cars, houses, jewelry, and other luxury items. Everything he had worked for over the previous decade was gone. The asset forfeiture was devastating. The government seized and sold everything. The 50+ luxury cars, the multiple mansions, the expensive jewelry, even personal items that had sentimental value. Omi went from being worth tens of millions of dollars to essentially having nothing. His car collection alone was worth over $10 million, including rare and exotic vehicles that he had spent years collecting. His real estate portfolio included properties worth millions of dollars that generated rental income. All of it was gone, sold at government auctions to help pay his restitution. The jewelry collection that he had loved to show off on social media was also seized and sold.
Jewelry around your neck right now. Which piece is like that piece?
For me right now, like emotionally, is probably this fast lanes.
Custom pieces that had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars were sold for a fraction of their original value. Everything that had represented his success and wealth was stripped away. Prison transformation. Omi was sent to serve his sentence at Danbury Federal Correctional Institution in Connecticut, the same prison that had housed other white-collar criminals and celebrities. During his incarceration, he went through a major personal transformation that went far beyond just losing weight. Physically, the change was dramatic. Omi lost over 130 pounds during his time in prison, going from 370 pounds when he was sentenced to 240 pounds by the time he was released. But the mental and emotional changes were even more significant. For the first time in years, Omi was forced to confront who he really was without the money, cars, and lifestyle that had defined his identity. He spent months in relative isolation, isolation, with limited communication with the outside world, which gave him time to reflect on his choices and their consequences. In interviews after his release, Omi described his time in prison as necessary for his personal growth. He admitted that he had been super entitled and had lacked genuine compassion for others. He realized that his entire adult life had been focused on accumulating wealth and status symbols while neglecting the relationships and values that actually mattered. He also acknowledged that his constant need for validation through social media and public attention had been a major factor in his downfall. If he had been content to make his money quietly and stay out of the spotlight, he might never have attracted federal attention. The isolation of prison forced Omi to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself. He admitted to struggling with depression, substance abuse, and relationship issues that he had been masking with money and material possessions. For the first time, he had to deal with these problems without being able to buy his way out of them. One of the most significant realizations Omi had was about the impact of his actions on his 5 children. He had missed years of their lives while he was focused on building his empire and then serving his prison sentence. His son Nomar didn't even understand that his father was in prison, thinking he was at fat camp when they would video chat. Omi also came to understand that his lifestyle had been unsustainable and ultimately hollow. Despite having tens of millions of dollars, he had been deeply unhappy and had been using money and material possessions to fill a void that couldn't be filled with external things. He realized that his father's lifestyle, which he had initially admired and tried to emulate, had actually been a cautionary tale. His father had died lonely at 84, despite his wealth and power, and Omi didn't want to follow the same path. The real cost. While Omi made approximately $35 million from his streaming empire, the real cost was much higher than the financial penalties. He lost over 2 years of his life to federal prison, missed precious time with his children during their formative years, and destroyed relationships with people who had cared about him. The psychological cost was also significant. Going from extreme wealth to having nothing, from being celebrated to being prosecuted, from freedom to incarceration, these kinds of dramatic reversals can be devastating to a person's mental health and sense of identity. Omi also had to live with the knowledge that his own actions had caused his downfall. If he had been content to make his money quietly, if he had paid his taxes properly, if he had stayed off social media, any of these different choices might have allowed him to keep his wealth and freedom. Omi was released from federal prison in late 2024 and immediately began working to rebuild his life, this time within the bounds of the law. He's focused on legitimate business ventures, including a shoe line called Reloaded that he had been developing before his incarceration. He's also exploring the possibility of returning to app development, but this time he's committed to ensuring that any new ventures are completely legal and properly licensed. He understands that he'll be under scrutiny for years to come and can't afford to make any mistakes. Most importantly, Omi is focused on rebuilding his relationships with his children and being the father he should have been all along. He's committed to being present in their lives and setting a better example for them than he did during his years of illegal activity. The man who was released from prison is fundamentally different from the one who was sentenced. He's more humble, more self-aware, and more focused on genuine relationships than material possessions. He's also more cautious about public attention and social media, understanding how his need for validation contributed to his downfall. Omi has expressed interest in using his story as a cautionary tale to help others avoid making similar mistakes. He wants to speak to young entrepreneurs about the importance of building legitimate businesses and the dangers of taking shortcuts that seem too good to be true. He's also committed to paying his restitution and fulfilling all the terms of his supervised release. He understands that he's been given a second chance and doesn't want to waste it by making the same mistakes that got him in trouble in the first place. Omi's story serves as a perfect example of how the American dream can become the American nightmare when you try to take shortcuts. He had genuine entrepreneurial skills and could have built a legitimate business empire if he had been patient and willing to work within the system. Instead, his need for quick money and instant gratification led him to build his empire on illegal foundations that were always going to collapse eventually. His story shows that there's no such thing as easy money. Every shortcut comes with risks that often outweigh the rewards. The most tragic part of Omi's story is that he actually had the skills and intelligence to succeed legitimately. His ability to identify market opportunities, build scalable technology platforms, and satisfy customer needs were all legitimate business skills that could have made him wealthy without breaking the law. At the end of the day, OmiInAHellCat found a way to exploit a billion-dollar industry and provide better service for a fraction of the price. In another timeline, he might have been considered an innovator who disrupted the traditional media industry, but his methods were illegal, and his need for attention made him a target. His biggest mistake wasn't creating the illegal streaming service. It was broadcasting his success to the world and essentially inviting federal scrutiny. If he had kept a low profile, paid his taxes, and stayed off social media, he might still be living that lavish lifestyle today. But Omi's need for validation and recognition was stronger than his survival instincts. He wanted to be seen as a successful entrepreneur and motivational figure, not understanding that the source of his wealth made that impossible. His story shows that sometimes the biggest enemy of success is success itself, especially when you can't resist the urge to show it off to the world. The streets taught Omi how to hustle and identify opportunities, but they didn't teach him when to stay quiet or how to build sustainable, legitimate businesses. Those lessons cost him everything, but hopefully, they're lessons he'll never forget. Today, Omi is working to rebuild his life the right way, with legitimate businesses and genuine relationships. He's learned that real wealth isn't about what you can show off, but what you can keep. And more importantly, he's learned that the most valuable things in life, family, health, and freedom, can't be bought with money, but they can definitely be lost because of it. R.I.P. to the old Omi. The new one seems to understand that true success is measured not by how much you can accumulate, but by how much you can contribute to the world without destroying yourself in the process.